Witnesses say he pulled out his phone, stared at the screen for a long moment, and then put it back in his pocket without making a call. Who was there left to call? He had alienated Amy, he had pushed his sons away, and the woman he did it all for was currently sitting inside the courtroom, surrounded by bailiffs, effectively labeled a flight risk by her own son. The isolation of Matt Roloff in that hallway is a tragic image that perfectly encapsulates the price of blind loyalty. He stood alone, surrounded by strangers who were only there to watch the spectacle of his downfall. Meanwhile, inside the judge's chambers, the legal battle was shifting from defense to damage control. We are hearing reports that Caryn's legal team immediately tried to cut a deal. They allegedly offered to surrender Caryn's passport, place her under house arrest, or anything to keep her out of a jail cell. But the prosecution, armed with Conor's fresh testimony and the physical hard drives he turned over, reportedly held the line. They argued that if Caryn had the means and the motive to flee to an offshore location, as Conor suggested, she could not be trusted to walk out of that courthouse. When the bailiff finally called for order and reopened the doors, the energy in the room had shifted from chaotic to somber. It felt like a funeral for a reputation. Everyone filed back in. Conor did not return to the stand. He sat in the back row, his head held high for the first time in years. He didn't look arrogant. He looked relieved. He looked like a man who had just set down a 100-pound weight he had been carrying since childhood. The judge swept back into the room, his robes flowing, his face unreadable. He took his seat and looked directly at Caryn Chandler. She was pale, her makeup smudged, a stark contrast to the polished reality star we see on TLC. She stood up, her hands gripping the table so hard her knuckles were white. "Ms. Chandler," the judge began, his voice echoing in the silent room. "In light of the witness testimony regarding potential flight plans and the introduction of new evidence to federal authorities, this court is revoking your current bail conditions." A gasp went through the room. Revoked. That meant one thing. You are to be remanded into custody pending a full hearing on these new allegations. Bailiffs, please take the defendant. Caryn didn't scream this time. She didn't fight. She simply crumpled. It was as if her skeleton had been removed. She looked back at the gallery one last time, searching for Matt. And this is the part that gives me chills. Matt was there. He was looking right at her. But he didn't move. He didn't nod. He didn't offer a reassuring smile. He just watched. It was a cold, hard stare of a man who finally sees the wolf in sheep's clothing. As the bailiff took Caryn's arm and guided her towards the side door, the door that leads to the holding cells, not the exit, she realized that the bridge wasn't just burned, it was incinerated. As the heavy door clicked shut behind her, finalizing her fall from grace, the focus shifted to the true MVP of this entire saga, Conor. Matt Roloff, sitting in the gallery, reportedly leaned forward, his face draining of color. He knows his family. He knows the look of someone about to go rogue. He's seen it with his own kids, and now he was seeing it with Caryn's son. The narrative was slipping away. Then, Conor leaned into the microphone. His voice was no longer shaking. It was steady, cold, and clear. He said, "No, that is not correct." The courtroom gasped. The defense attorney froze. This was not in the prep notes. This was not part of the plan. The attorney tried to pivot, tried to cut him off, saying, "I think you misunderstood the question, Conor. Let me rephrase." "I didn't misunderstand anything," Conor interrupted, his voice rising. "You asked if she was transparent. You asked if I knew about the hiding. I do know, because she made me part of it." This is where the speculation ends and the absolute chaos begins. What Conor proceeded to detail over the next 20 minutes was not just a betrayal of his mother. It was a systematic dismantling of every defense Caryn Chandler has ever constructed. He didn't just say she was lying. He provided the roadmap to the truth. We're talking about allegations of bribes used to silence people close to the farm. We are talking about threats made to family members to keep them in line. And most damning of all, We are talking about the physical evidence. You have to remember, for years, fans of Little People, Big World have theorized that Caryn was more than just a girlfriend. We've seen the way she inserted herself into the farm negotiations. We've seen the tension with Amy. We've seen the estrangement of the Roloff kids. We all felt like there was a puppet master pulling the strings, but we never had proof. We never had the smoking gun. We just had uncomfortable dinner scenes and awkward confessionals. But Connor? Connor supposedly had the smoking gun in his apartment. He told the judge, under oath, with penalties of perjury hanging over his head, that Caryn had panicked when the investigation rumors started. He claimed that she came to him late at night, terrified, carrying a bag of digital hard drives and folders. He described the scene in vivid detail. His mother, usually so composed, looking frantic, telling him that these items could never be found by the authorities or by Matt's forensic accountants. She allegedly told him that if this got out, everything they had worked for, the retirement home in Arizona, the lifestyle, the control over the farm, would be gone. Imagine being in that courtroom. Imagine being Matt Roloff, hearing that the woman you alienated your children for, the woman you defended against your own ex-wife, was allegedly running a covert operation behind your back, using her own son as a stash house for incriminating evidence. The betrayal is double-layered. It's a betrayal of the law, and it's a betrayal of Matt's trust. If these reports are true, Caryn wasn't just protecting herself, she was hiding things from Matt too. Or, perhaps even darker, she was hiding things for Matt, and Connor was exposing a conspiracy that involves them both. Connor went on to describe the contents of these drives. He didn't just hold the bag, he looked inside. He spoke of emails. He spoke of altered ledgers. He spoke of recorded conversations that Caryn had made without people's consent. This is the insider theory that is gaining the most traction right now. The idea that Caryn has an insurance policy, a collection of dirt on everyone, including Matt, to ensure that if she goes down, she doesn't go down alone. And she tried to hide this insurance policy in Connor's apartment. The judge was reportedly scribbling furiously. The court stenographer was typing at record speed. The prosecution table, usually the ones fighting an uphill battle in these high-profile celebrity cases, looked like they had just won the lottery. They didn't even have to work for this. The defense witness was doing their job for them. Caryn's reaction during this initial monologue was one of paralyzed shock. Witnesses say her mouth was slightly open, her eyes wide, staring at Connor as if he were a stranger. She didn't move. She didn't whisper to her lawyer. She was watching her life implode in real time. But as Connor continued, as he started to list specific dates and specific amounts of money that were allegedly moved around to avoid detection, the shop turned into something else. It turned into rage. We often see Caryn as the diplomat on the show. She's the one trying to smooth things over, the one with the calm voice. But we have to wonder, is that a mask? Is the real Caryn Chandler the woman who allegedly orchestrates cover-ups? Connor's testimony suggests that the nice lady routine is a carefully curated performance, and he was tired of being a prop in her play. He spoke about the emotional blackmail. He told the court that Caryn had threatened to cut him off, to ruin his reputation, to ensure he never saw his family again if he didn't hold on to this evidence. He painted a picture of a mother who viewed her son not as a child to be loved, but as an asset to be used, a liability to be managed. The tension in the room was ratchet tight. You could feel the explosion coming. The defense attorney finally snapped out of their stupor and shouted, "Objection! Hearsay! This is irrelevant!" attempting to shut Connor down. But the judge overrode it. The judge wanted to hear this. Pandora's box had been opened, and there was no closing it. Connor was on a roll, and he was fueled by years of silence. He looked at the judge and said, "I'm done lying for her. I'm done being the scapegoat. The drives are real. I turned them over to the FBI this morning before I walked in here." Let that sink in. I turned them over to the FBI this morning. That was the line that broke the dam. That was the moment the courtroom stopped being a place of law and started being a scene of absolute chaos. The realization hit Caryn that the evidence wasn't just exposed verbally, it was physically in the hands of federal agents. Her safety net was gone. Her leverage was gone. Her son had not only testified against her, he had actively assisted the prosecution before the trial even started today. He was a double agent. The noise in the courtroom began to rise. Reporters were whispering into their recorders. The gallery was murmuring, a low roar of disbelief. Matt Roloff had his head in his hands. And Caryn? The calm, collected Caryn Chandler? She was about to lose it. The mask was slipping, and the meltdown we are about to describe is something that will be talked about for decades. This wasn't just a legal defeat. It was a public unraveling of a personality that has fooled millions of viewers for years. We are approaching the moment of the actual outburst, the screaming match that forced the judge to threaten contempt. But to understand why she screamed, you have to understand the depth of the deception Conor revealed. He didn't just stop at the finances. He brought up the family dynamics. He brought up things Caryn had said about the Roloff grandchildren, things she had said about Amy, things that were so cutting and so personal that they paint her as a villain of Shakespearean proportions. The silence that followed Conor's admission about the FBI was not the silence of peace. It was the vacuum before a nuclear detonation. You have to understand the gravity of what he just said. By turning state's witness before the trial even commenced, Conor didn't just betray his mother's defense strategy, he effectively dismantled her entire legal standing. The defense attorney, who had been standing with the arrogance of a man who thought he had the winning hand, slowly sank back into his chair. There was nothing he could do. He couldn't object to the truth. He couldn't object to federal evidence. And most importantly, he couldn't stop Conor, who was now speaking with the velocity of a freight train that had lost its brakes. Sources say that as the bailiff called Conor's name, a hush fell over the room that was almost deafening. You could hear the wooden floorboards creak as he walked to the witness stand. But something was off. According to leaks from people present in the gallery, Conor didn't look like a man coming to save his mother. He looked like a man walking to the gallows, or perhaps a man walking to light the fuse on a bomb. He avoided eye contact with everyone. He didn't look at the judge. He didn't look at the jury box. And most tellingly, he did not look at Caryn. Caryn, on the other hand, reportedly beamed at him. She offered a small, encouraging nod, the kind a mother gives a child at a school play. It was a gesture of control, a subtle reminder of the script they were supposed to be following. She expected the prepared PR statement. She expected him to recite the lines about how his mother was a saint, how she had only ever tried to help the Roloffs, and how she was the glue holding everything together. She was ready for the softballs. She was ready for the redemption arc. But what she didn't realize, and what Matt Roloff in the gallery seemingly didn't anticipate, was that the pressure on Conor had reached a breaking point. We have to talk about that pressure. Insider theory suggests that leading up to this trial, the dynamic between Caryn and Conor had become toxic. There are whispers of late-night phone calls, of heated arguments in parking lots, and of financial leverage being used as a weapon. The theory is that Caryn wasn't just asking for a favor, she was demanding loyalty in exchange for silence or support regarding Conor's own life. But the problem with backing someone into a corner is that eventually they stop being afraid and start getting angry. And yesterday, Conor brought all of that anger, all of that resentment, and a terrifying amount of receipts into the halls of justice. When Conor finally took his seat and the clerk swore at him in, asking him to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, witnesses say there was a long, uncomfortable pause. He took a sip of water. His hands were shaking. The defense attorney, Caryn's lawyer, stood up with a confident smile, ready to guide him through the easy questions. The opening was standard. State your name for the record. What is your relationship to the defendant? These were the warm-up pitches. Conor answered them quietly, his voice barely rising above a murmur. The judge actually had to ask him to speak up into the microphone twice. This low energy, this reluctance, should have been the first red flag for Caryn's team. A star witness is supposed to be charismatic, sure of themselves, and eager to help. Connor was none of those things. He was a tightly coiled spring. The defense attorney moved into the narrative building. Connor, would you describe your mother as a trustworthy person? Has she always acted with the best interests of her family at heart? In your observation, has she ever engaged in deceitful behavior regarding the Roloff farm finances? These were the questions that were designed to elicit a simple, yes, she is trustworthy. Yes, she loves the family. And no, never. It was a script. It was a performance. And for the first few minutes, Connor played along, but barely. He gave one-word answers. Yes. I guess. Sure. It wasn't convincing, but it wasn't a disaster. Yet. But then the energy shifted. The cross-examination began, or perhaps, depending on which insider report you believe, Connor simply couldn't hold it in any longer during the direct questioning. The turning point came when the topic of hidden assets was broached. The lawyer asked a leading question, something along the lines of, "You have no knowledge of your mother hiding any documents or digital drives, correct? She has been fully transparent?" This was the moment. This was the trigger. According to exclusive details leaking from the courtroom, Connor's demeanor changed instantly. He stopped looking at his hands and looked directly at Caryn. It wasn't a look of love. It was a look of pure exhaustion and defiance. He didn't answer the question immediately. He let the silence hang in the air for 5, maybe 10 seconds. In a courtroom, 10 seconds is an eternity. It's enough time for hearts to stop beating. It's enough time for a defense attorney to realize they have made a catastrophic mistake. We have to take a moment to appreciate what Connor just did. For years, the public has been hard on him. He's been painted as the black sheep, the troubled son, the one with the issues. But when the chips were down, when the pressure was highest, and when he had every financial incentive to keep lying and keep taking his mother's hush money, he chose the truth. He chose integrity. He walked into a courtroom, looked his abuser in the eye, and told the world exactly who she was. He didn't just save himself. In a way, he might have saved the rest of the Roloff family from further manipulation. He is the unlikely hero of this story. He walked out of that courthouse not as a suspect, but as the whistleblower who brought down the house of cards. Reporters tried to swarm him as he left the building, shoving microphones in his face, asking him how he felt about sending his mother to jail. Connor didn't stop to give a sensational interview. He didn't try to monetize the moment. He simply put on his sunglasses, walked past the cameras, and got into a waiting car. That silence speaks louder than any reality TV confessional ever could. It was the silence of a man who is finally free. So I have to ask you, the viewers, the fans who have been tracking this story for years, did Connor just become the legend of the Roloff saga? Did he just do what Matt, Amy, and all the producers couldn't do? If you respect him for choosing the hard truth over the easy lie, I want you to go to the comment section right now and type the word hero. Let's flood the comments with support for the guy who finally broke the cycle. Type hero if you think Connor deserves a standing ovation for what he did in that courtroom. But the story doesn't end here, not by a long shot. As Caryn sits in a holding cell and Matt returns to an empty farm, the evidence is just starting to be processed. And we have received word of something that is going to blow this case wide open in the coming weeks. Remember the audio recording Connor mentioned? The one he gave to the FBI? My sources tell me that a leaked snippet of that audio is circulating on the dark web, and we are working tirelessly to verify it and clean it up for you. We are hearing that this tape features Caryn's voice, clear as day, discussing not just the finances, but the show itself. Allegedly, she is heard laughing about how easy it was to manipulate Matt, calling him gullible, and bragging about how she was going to cash out before the series was canceled. We are going to have that audio for you in the next video. You do not want to miss hearing the voice of the real Caryn Chandler, stripped of the editing and the production gloss. It is chilling, it is infuriating, and it is the final piece of the puzzle. So make sure you are subscribed. Make sure you have hit that notification bell, because when that audio drops, it is going to break the internet, and we will be the first ones to bring it to you with a full breakdown. The trial of the century is just getting started, and the Roloff farm will never be the same. Thanks for watching, stay tuned, and remember, the truth always comes out in the end. Caryn let out a sound that was half gasp, half sob. The realization that she was alone, truly alone, hit her. The defense attorney finally managed to force her back into her chair, physically pushing her down by the shoulders. She was hyperventilating, her chest heaving, her face flushed a deep, blotchy red. She looked around the room, realizing that everyone, the jury, the judge, the press, and Matt, was looking at her with a mixture of pity and disgust. The judge was furious. His face was stern, his patience vaporized. He leaned over the bench, glaring at the defense table. "Miss Chandler, one more outburst like that, and I will have you removed from this courtroom and placed in a holding cell. This is a court of law, not a reality television set. Do you understand me?" Caryn nodded weakly, burying her face in her hands. The fight had left her as quickly as it had arrived, replaced by the crushing weight of reality. But the damage was done. The jury had seen the real Caryn. They had seen the anger, the entitlement, and the desperation. Connor had effectively baited her into destroying her own character defense. Connor watched this all with a strange calmness. He didn't look triumphant. He looked sad. He waited for the bailiffs to step back and for the judge to stop speaking. Then, he delivered the final blow of his testimony, the piece of information that ties the recent news rumors to the concrete reality of the FBI investigation. "Your Honor," Connor said quietly, "she is afraid of the one I gave to the agents. It's not just her yelling. It's her on the phone with the offshore account manager. It proves the money laundering. And it proves she was planning to leave the country if the farm sale didn't go through." If the courtroom was chaotic before, it went dead silent now. Flight risk. Connor had just labeled his mother a flight risk. The prosecutor stood up, seizing the moment. "Your Honor, in light of this new testimony and the witness's indication of flight planning, the people request a recess to review the new evidence submitted to the FBI and to reconsider the defendant's bail status." This was the end of the road for Caryn's freedom. The walls were closing in from every side. The judge nodded, checking his watch. "We will take a 30-minute recess. Counsel, I want to see you in my chambers immediately. Bailiffs, ensure the defendant does not leave this room." As the gavel banged to signal the recess, the spell broke. The courtroom dissolved into noise. Reporters were sprinting for the doors to file their stories. Matt Roloff remained in his seat, frozen, unable to process that the woman he thought was his partner was allegedly planning to flee the country with his money. He looked like a man watching his house burn down, realizing he was the one who handed the arsonist the matches. Caryn didn't move. She sat staring at the table, her hands trembling. She didn't look at Connor as he was escorted off the stand. She didn't look at Matt. She was trapped in the wreckage of her own making. This meltdown wasn't just a legal disaster. It was the series finale of the narrative she had tried to control for so long. The saintly girlfriend character was dead. The manipulative mastermind had been exposed, and the person who pulled the curtain back was the one person she thought she owned completely. The 30 minutes that followed that recess declaration were arguably the longest 30 minutes in the history of the Roloff family saga. If you thought the tension inside the courtroom was high, the hallway was a pressure cooker waiting to explode. As the doors swung open and the spectators spilled out, the atmosphere wasn't one of excitement anymore. It was one of stunned disbelief. People were huddled in tight circles, whispering furiously. The air was thick with the realization that we had just witnessed the end of an era. The little people, big world empire, built on pumpkins and family values, had just been exposed as a facade for what appears to be a sophisticated, calculated financial scheme orchestrated by the one person Matt Roloff trusted above all others. But the most telling image of that recess wasn't the frantic reporters or the stunned jury. It was Matt Roloff himself. Sources who were in the corridor describe a man who looked utterly defeated. For decades, Matt has been the architect of his own reality. He moves dirt. He builds castles. He negotiates deals. He is a man who believes he can fix anything with a tractor and a spreadsheet. But as he stood near the water fountain, leaning heavily on his crutches, He looked like a man who realized he couldn't fix this. He couldn't negotiate his way out of federal evidence. He couldn't charm the FBI. And most devastatingly, he couldn't undo the damage he had done to his relationship with Zach, Jeremy, Molly, and Jacob. Connor began to detail exactly what was on those drives. And this is where the story shifts from a financial crime drama to a full-blown family tragedy. According to the leaked transcripts and the feverish notes taken by reporters in the front row, the drives didn't just contain ledgers or tax documents. They contained what insiders are calling the Roloff dossiers. Connor testified that for years, Caryn had been keeping detailed, digitized notes on every single member of the Roloff family. These weren't just casual observations. They were strategic intelligence. He described folders labeled with the names of Zach, Jeremy, and even Matt himself. The courtroom listened in horrified fascination as Connor described the contents of the Matt folder. He claimed that Caryn had documented every moment of weakness, every pill taken, every glass of wine consumed, and every complaint Matt had made about his children during their private moments. Connor alleged that Caryn told him this was her leverage. She had explicitly stated to him on multiple occasions during their secret meetings that if Matt ever tried to leave her or cut her out of the will, she would release these details to the public to destroy his reputation as a businessman and a father. She was effectively building a dossier to hold the patriarch of the family hostage in his own relationship. Matt Roloff, hearing this, was described by witnesses as looking like a ghost. He was staring at the back of Caryn's head, his mouth slightly agape. For years, he had defended this woman to his ex-wife, to his children, and to the world. He had told Amy she was crazy. He had told Zach he was being unreasonable. He had torched the bridges with his own bloodline to stand by Caryn. And now, he was hearing that she had been cataloging his life like a forensic scientist, preparing to dissect him the moment he stopped being useful. The realization visibly crushed him. He wasn't the powerful farm owner at that moment. He was just an old man who had been played for a fool. But Connor wasn't done. He turned his attention to the farm deal. This is the holy grail of little people, big world mysteries. Why did the sale fall through? Why did Zach and Jeremy really walk away? Connor provided the answer, and it is more sinister than any of us guessed. He testified that the hard drives contained emails and text messages between Caryn and a separate, undisclosed legal advisor, someone not on the official payroll. In these messages, Connor alleged that Caryn actively strategized on how to sabotage the negotiations between Matt and his sons. He claimed she didn't want the boys to take over the farm because it would dilute her potential inheritance and control. Connor told the court that Caryn had whispered poison in Matt's ear, exaggerating the boys' incompetence, highlighting their flaws, and convincing Matt to raise the price to a number she knew they couldn't afford. She essentially rigged the game. She wanted the farm to be sold to an outsider or turned into a rental property because that was liquid cash, cash she could access. Whereas if it went to Zach or Jeremy, the asset would be locked up in the Roloff legacy. This revelation caused a ripple of murmurs to break out in the gallery. This changes everything we know about the last 5 seasons of the show. It wasn't just stubbornness from Matt, it was manipulation by Caryn. She was the architect of the family's destruction. Connor looked directly at the jury and said, "She told me she didn't care if the kids hated Matt. In fact, she said it was better if they were estranged because then they wouldn't be around to ask questions about the money." The defense attorney finally jumped up, shouting, "Objection! This is a character assassination! This is speculation!" But the judge, a stern figure who had clearly lost patience with the defense's theatrics, slammed the gavel down. "Overruled! The witness is testifying to statements made directly to him by the defendant. It goes to motive. Continue, Mr. Chandler." It is the unwritten rule of nature, a bond that is supposed to be unbreakable. A son protects his mother. In the animal kingdom and in human society, that loyalty is expected to be absolute, a primal instinct that supersedes all other laws. But inside a tense, suffocating Oregon courtroom yesterday, that rule wasn't just broken, it was shattered into a million irreparable pieces. Caryn Chandler, the woman who has stood at the center of the Roloff family controversy for years, called her son Connor to the witness stand. The strategy was clear. She expected him to be her savior. She expected him to be the ultimate character witness who would silence the haters and vindicate her in the eyes of the law and the public. Instead, in a turn of events that has left legal experts and family insiders absolutely reeling, he handed the judge the final nail for her coffin. You are not going to believe what was just exposed under oath, and the shockwaves from this testimony are going to change the trajectory of Little People, Big World forever. Before we dive deep into the transcript of this absolute courtroom meltdown and the specific chilling details Connor revealed about the digital evidence, I need you to do one thing. If you want to be on the right side of the truth and stay updated as we decode these leaking court documents, hit that like button right now. And if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button. We are the only channel brave enough to bring you these insider reports that the mainstream media is too afraid to touch. Join the community, turn on notifications, and let's get into the story that Matt Roloff is praying you never hear. To understand the magnitude of what happened yesterday, we have to set the stage. This wasn't just a standard hearing. According to multiple sources close to the production and whispers circulating through the Oregon legal community, the atmosphere inside that courtroom was heavier than anything the Roloff family has faced before. For months, we have been hearing rumors, dark, persistent rumors, about a federal inquiry involving financial irregularities, potential asset hiding, and an investigation that has been slowly closing in on the dynamics of the farm and its management. While the family has kept a tight lid on this for the sake of the show's image, insiders suggest that Caryn has been under immense pressure to prove that her involvement in Matt's business dealings was purely supportive, not manipulative or illegal. The courtroom yesterday was packed. Reports describe the air conditioning struggling to combat the heat of the tension in the room. Matt Roloff was seated in the gallery, directly behind the defense table. Observers noted that Matt looked uncharacteristically nervous. Usually the man in charge, usually the one directing the narrative, was seen fidgeting with his glasses, constantly scanning the room, perhaps aware that the house of cards was trembling. He was there to support Caryn, obviously, but there was a fear in his eyes that sources say they haven't seen since the height of the divorce proceedings with Amy. But this was different. This wasn't about land disputes or pumpkin season logistics. This was about potential criminal liability and the kind of secrets that destroy reputations permanently. Caryn sat at the defense table, and by all accounts, she looked confident, perhaps too confident. This is a woman who has navigated the complex, often hostile waters of reality TV fame for years. She has been the target of hate, the subject of conspiracy theories, and she has always managed to hold her head high, smiling next to Matt. Her legal team had crafted a defense strategy that relied heavily on character testimony. The narrative they wanted to sell to the judge, and by extension to the world, was one of a naive, loving partner. They wanted to paint Caryn not as the mastermind behind the farm's sale or the alleged financial maneuvering, but as a victim caught in the crossfire of a decades-long family feud. The plan was to show that any erratic financial moves or hidden accounts were simply her trying to protect Matt's legacy from the chaos of his own family. And who better to validate that image than her own flesh and blood? Calling Connor to the stand was a high-stakes gamble, but on paper, it looked like a winning move. Connor has had his own struggles, his own legal history, and his own public battles. The defense likely calculated that a redeemed son, stepping up to defend his mother, would be a powerful emotional image. It would humanize Caryn. It would show that despite her flaws, she is a dedicated mother who commands loyalty. If her own son, who has every reason to be distant or difficult, was willing to swear under oath to her integrity, it would cast a shadow of doubt on the prosecution's entire case. It was supposed to be the checkmate moment where Caryn secured her freedom and her reputation. The gavel bang echoed like a gunshot. Connor took a deep breath. He moved on to the bribes. He detailed a system of payments that Caryn had allegedly funneled through him to keep various people quiet. He spoke of Venmo transactions and Cash App transfers that were broken down into small amounts to avoid triggering banking alerts, a technique known as structuring, which is a federal crime in itself. He admitted, with tears in his eyes, that he had accepted some of this money. He admitted he was complicit. "She paid my rent," he said, his voice cracking. "She paid for my car repairs. But every time she gave me money, she told me I owned her. She told me that if I ever spoke up, she would frame me. She said she would tell the police that I stole the money from Matt and that she was covering for me. She threatened to put me in prison to save herself." This was the breaking point. The image of a mother framing her own son, setting him up as the fall guy for her crimes, was too much for the room to process quietly. The gallery erupted. Reporters were frantically typing. But amidst the noise, a sound cut through the chaos like a knife. It was a chair scraping violently against the floor. Caryn Chandler stood up. Up until this moment, she had been a statue. But the accusation that she would frame Connor, that she would sacrifice her own child, snapped something inside her. She didn't consult her lawyer. She didn't ask for permission. She simply lost control. Her face, usually so composed for the cameras, was twisted into a mask of absolute fury. It was a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. "You ungrateful little liar," she screamed. The voice didn't sound like the Caryn we know. It was shrill, guttural, and loud enough to be heard in the hallway outside. The entire courtroom froze. The stenographer stopped typing. The judge's eyes went wide. Caryn wasn't finished. She pointed a shaking finger at Connor, leaning over the defense table. "I gave you everything. I paid for your mistakes. I kept you out of jail. And this is how you repay me? By making up stories? By siding with them?" She gestured wildly toward the gallery where Matt was sitting, though it was unclear if she meant Matt or the Roloff family in general. The defense attorney was frantically pulling at her arm, whispering, "Caryn, sit down now." But she shook him off with surprising strength. She was in a free fall of rage. She turned to the judge, ignoring all protocol. "Your Honor, this is a joke. He's a junkie. You're going to listen to him? He's lying to get a book deal. He's lying because I cut him off." The judge was now hammering the gavel repeatedly, a rapid-fire staccato that filled the room. "Order! Order in this court! Miss Chandler, sit down or you will be held in contempt. Counsel, control your client." But the chaos had taken on a life of its own. Connor, seeing his mother lunging verbally at him, didn't shrink back. He leaned into the microphone, his voice booming over the sound of the gavel. "I'm not lying, Mom. The FBI has the texts. They have the recording from Christmas. They know what you said about Matt." "Shut up," Caryn shrieked, her voice cracking. "You don't have anything. You are nothing without me." Matt Roloff stood up in the gallery. It was an involuntary reaction. He looked like a man waking up from a coma. He was seeing the woman he loved screaming like a banshee, attacking her son, and effectively confessing to the manipulation by her sheer desperation to silence him. The mask had not just slipped, it had been incinerated. This was the meltdown that insiders had whispered might happen, but no one predicted it would be this visceral. The bailiffs were moving now. 2 officers stepped towards the defense table, hands hovering near their belts, ready to restrain Caryn if she made a move toward the witness stand. The sight of armed officers closing in on a reality TV star in a sleepy Oregon courtroom is an image that will define this decade of the show. "I will not be silenced by a drug addict," Caryn yelled, her eyes wild. She looked at Matt, perhaps expecting him to jump the rail and defend her. She locked eyes with him. "Matt, tell them he's a liar." And this is the moment that will go down in history, the moment of poetic justice. Matt Roloff, the man who is famous for his indecision, the man who always tries to negotiate, looked his girlfriend in the eye. The room held its breath. Would he defend her? Would he claim this was all a misunderstanding? Matt slowly shook his head. It was a small movement, but it was devastating. He turned his back on her and sat back down, slumping low in the wooden bench, putting his head in his hands. He rejected her, publicly, completely.